I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability at Westchester University, and I'm really happy to see so many people have logged on today for this presentation. I'm very much looking forward to it, and I'm going to hand the virtual floor over to Professor Ashley and her colleagues, Ananiya, Lilah, and Mayana. But before I do, I just want to remind everyone that this is the second presentation in our Fall 2020 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. Every Wednesday at this same time, we have presentations from faculty, staff, students, and even some invited guests and neighbors of Westchester University on a variety of topics related to sustainability. We always have really good conversations and dialogue after the presentations. So I welcome all of you who are watching today to come back throughout the semester. If you need to see a list of the speakers and the topics, go to wcupa.edu/sustainability. And right there on the homepage of our Office of Sustainability website, you'll find a full schedule for this semester. With that, I am going to say thank you to Hannah Ashley and her colleagues and hand the floor over to you for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks. So I'm really going to talk very briefly because when Brad asked me to do this presentation, I said, honestly, yeah, I do run the Rustin Urban Community Change Axis, which is currently has the Youth Empowerment and Urban Studies minor, and we hope to have an urban community change major within a year up and running. And of course, urban community change matters in terms of sustaining our world, our city, our communities a great deal. But I really feel like the most important information that we need is understanding what young people's and young adults' perspectives are on this and be listening to that. And so that's why I wanted to organize things by asking some colleagues and friends of mine to present. So I'm going to, I guess one thing I'll just say is that if you're interested in the YES program or RUCCAS, just contact me afterward because I'm going to have to hop off right at the end. So you might not be able to catch me to chat. But the three people that are going to speak for about 10 minutes each, and then we should have some time for questions and discussion, are an alumni, Lilah Saber, who was a YES student and also a social work student, and now has been working in POWER, which is an organization that she'll tell you a little more about it, but she's been out of school for a couple of years. Ananiya Jones, who is a current student at Westchester and has been doing organizing also for quite a while in political science, and is doing stuff both on and off campus in really interesting ways. So I'm excited to have her. And then Mayana Ashley-Carner, who is, it says she's a CCP student. She's actually sort of on the cusp. She's a dual enrollment student, both in high school and finishing her degree at CCP. So I thought that at 3 different levels, it would be interesting to listen to young people's perspectives. Okay, you can flip now, Amy. To the next slide. Yeah, so the things that I want to say, I just offered some thoughts that were not mine, but I think one thing what is going on right now, according to Keeanga-Yamada Taylor, who also happens to be a neighbor of mine, is that we are witnessing the broadest protest movement in American history. And that is something to notice, right? It's really broad. It's maybe not the longest yet. It's not the longest, but it's very broad. It's certainly long if we look back to maybe Ferguson or even further. So I think that's of note. Arundhati Roy, an author, offers us the possibility of really visioning something new. And I think that we should open ourselves to the possibility that we really can imagine a new world, and that we have to. We just absolutely must imagine a new world. Otherwise, we're basically screwed, is my perspective. Ed Markey, the reason I liked his thing is because he just recently he's going to get reelected. He won his primary against a Kennedy, and if you follow politics at all, you know Kennedys never lose, and it was young people who helped him to win. And you may feel this way or that way about electoral politics. Some people have mixed feelings about that, but he won because young people put him back on the ballot against a Kennedy. So, and his point is, we just got to take it. We can't last to be handed it. And I just like this last quote from Chico Mendes was he's a union organizer, but also, you know, an environmentalist in Brazil, who said environmentalism without class struggle is just gardening. So I like that. I think it's just really important to make those connections. So those are really just some thoughts that I'm offering. And after everybody presents their stuff, I'll facilitate like Q&A and discussion. So I think maybe hold your thoughts, but if you put them in the chat, that's okay too. All right, so I believe Lila's gonna go first, so take it away.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Lilah. Like Hannah said, if you all have thoughts, please put them in the chat and either we can address them now or at the end. Yeah, so I am a graduate of WestChester University. I graduated in 2018 with a degree in social work and a minor in youth empowerment and urban studies, which is the program Hannah was just talking about. I work as a community organizer and I'm a resident of Philadelphia. I am an Arab American and I am a person of faith, and that all kind of ties into my story. When I think about how I started in organizing, it really starts way back. 9/11 happened when I was 5, and that was really a monumental time for a lot of people, but specifically for Arab and Muslim Americans, because soon after, there was an incredible amount of violence inflicted on my community and communities like mine, unwarranted government surveillance and harassment, and we started to organize out of necessity. We started to organize mutual aid for our communities to make sure that they were fed and cared for as people began losing their jobs because of discrimination. We started to organize around policies that would support communities like us, and that's kind of how we survived for a long time. Until I got to college at WestChester, and I had a few realizations. One was that you could actually organize for things that you want. You didn't just always have to organize out of necessity and out of survival, but you could actually begin to think about like the world that you wanted to live in and organize for those things and organize for political change that actually felt like that new world that Hannah was just talking about. And the second thing I realized is that organizing could be a career path, that it wasn't just something I had to do in my free time or when I had a second or something like that, but it could actually like be my life, like something that I dedicated a lot of time to. And Hannah didn't tell me to do this, but I do want to give a special shout out to the YES program. I wouldn't be an organizer if I didn't go through the YES program, and I wouldn't be in this career field, and I wouldn't be as dedicated to justice work for my life if I wasn't a graduate of the YES program. So just a plug if you're at all interested in this kind of work for your life for that program. Now the work I do is with an organization called POWER. It stands for Pennsylvanians Organized to Witness, Empower, and Rebuild. We're an interfaith organization that does community organizing all across Pennsylvania. So we have church people and synagogues and mosques and ethical societies that all work together for anti-racist justice work. So we work on things like getting fair wages and ending mass incarceration and an end to racist funding and education and climate justice and all that kind of stuff. So I just put up some pictures here to kind of visualize it. So specifically the picture on the right needs a little explaining. That's a group of clergy that did a die-in, which is kind of a theatrical tactic that people use where they'll lay in a public place and pretend to die to show kind of the threat that exists if we don't pass whatever issue we're working on. This particular set of clergy, we're trying to get health care for low-income workers at the airport. Could you go to the next slide? This is a picture of a rally that we had about 1.5 years ago in our state capital in Harrisburg. We gathered around 1,000 people of faith from across the state to demand the end of racist funding in education. And then could you go one slide after this? And then I wanted to include this picture. This is actually the most recent picture that I put up. This picture is from, I think, June of this year. This is one of our clergy people. It's kind of a jarring picture of one of our clergy people in a gas mask and with earplugs around his neck. My work for the last few months has been supporting a set of clergy people in Philadelphia that call themselves the movement chaplains. They're trained in de-escalation and nonviolent resistance, and they work in a lot of different ways on the streets to support frontline protesters and offer them some spiritual care. They also are often putting their bodies on the line between police and protesters, acting as like a physical barrier to prevent violence, because police are less likely to commit violence against a clergy person than a protester. So they act in all of these ways, and I have been supporting them on the ground as part of my work. Could you go to the next slide? So I was asked to talk a little bit about both what sustains me and what I see as sustaining this movement past this moment. So when I think about organizing, I mean, it's both the most fulfilling thing I've ever done and the most difficult thing I've ever done all at the same time, but it's like both of those. And so I found some sustainability practices that have worked for me in my short 3 years as an organizer. One is that I really have a support team of people that are supporting me as an organizer. That's not just like one person, but that's like a therapist that I meet with every week that is anti-racist and anti-capitalist and knows about organizing and can kind of walk me through all of that. I have clergy mentors that I meet with through my organization. I have really great supervisors at work. I have a personal network of friends and organizers that also are committing to this work. And I really think that's important, that we can't really rely on just ourselves or one person to get us through this, but we really need like a team of people backing us up, because this work is, like I said, incredibly challenging. The other thing that I have found that sustains me is taking large breaks that this whole 9 to 5, 5 days a week with 2 days on the weekend just like isn't going to cut it for organizers. That we actually need like way longer breaks. I find that there's times of the year where I'm working 65 hours a week, and then there are times of the year that I'm working 20 hours a week, and that's like totally okay. And we need those kinds of ebb and flows to be able to sustain ourselves past a moment. So taking like weeks off at a time has been really helpful for me, and fully disconnecting from the work. The other thing that sustains me is understanding that I can't run a movement, that any political movement that comes up, if I can't remove myself for a week, if I can't take a week off or even a day off, then I'm doing something wrong in my job. That if our political organizing work is about collectivism and really building some kind of collective community, that any individual should be able to be taken out of it, and we should still be able to do our work, because it's about the whole and not about the individual. The golden rule of organizing that I was taught was never do for others what they can do for themselves. That I, as an organizer, my job isn't to do for other people, but my job is to trust that community members actually have expertise around the issues that are affecting them. And my job is just to equip them and give them the confidence and the skills to do it. But that ultimately communities can run their own campaigns and communities can do their own organizing, and it's not my job. And I will burn out so much quicker if I make it my job. And the last thing that specifically sustained me over the last few months is grounding myself in history, that there are thousands of years of organizing that has come before me, that we have existed under tyrannical empires for the history of humanity, and that none of this is new. I mean, there are particular things in this moment that make this moment intimidating and scary, but like none of this is new, and I have to rely that there are people that came before me that have the expertise on how to do this work, and then I can ground myself in like their work and their teachings and their readings to sustain me in a moment like this. Yeah, could you go to the next slide? And then when I think about kind of the larger sustaining this whole movement, I mean, I have like a snapshot and some thoughts on how to do that. One is that there's a real difference between organizing and activism, that activism kind of comes up in a moment of like, a moment that is like particularly politically fueled or emotionally fueled. Like I think about the past few months after the police murdered George Floyd, that was a moment of activism, right? That people just took to the streets. There was, I mean, one of the marches in Philadelphia had somewhere like 75,000 people that just ended up on the streets because they were deeply pained by what they saw, and they needed to do something about it. That is absolutely necessary for the movement, moments of activism and people just flooding to the streets. But ultimately, if we're going to sustain this past a moment of activism and past a moment of like really politically and emotionally fueled charge to the streets, we're going to need to organize. And organizing is different because organizing means that we have to build a base of people that are ready to move when whatever campaign they're running demands them to move. So for me, at least, I'm not interested in just building up a bunch of people that will flood to the streets when you know, the government does something we don't like or the police murder another person, but I'm interested in having a base of people in Philadelphia that are ready to move when they want something for their community and on their terms, which is the work of organizing. The other thing that I think about in sustaining this movement is that intergenerational organizing is absolutely non-negotiable. Before Power, I was working with Philadelphia high school students with an organization called 12 Plus, doing some mentoring. And what I saw in young people and what I saw in myself and my fellow students at Westchester is that we as young people really have the ability to dream about that other world that Hannah was talking about, to dream and to vision about something that is different than our current reality. And that's a skill in organizing. Like, dreaming and visioning is a real skill. And that now in my work, in which I mostly work with older people, lots of clergy, lots of like old church folks, that vision sometimes is really, really hard to access. That they've been through organizing for decades, and there's been a lot of losses in organizing, and it's a lot harder to imagine a world that could exist after this for some of my leaders that are a little bit older. And what I also notice is that some of the older people that I work with are really what we call movement elders, that they've been doing this since they were teenagers, and they know how to do the work, right? They have skills, they have knowledge, they have expertise, they have wisdom, and like they have resources. Older people have like money that we don't have, and they have like a network of powerful people sometimes that they've built through relationships. And I see that if we're going to sustain this movement past right now, we're going to need to figure out how to build an intergenerational movement in which young people can lead on the vision and dreaming and imagination, and older people can offer the resources and the skills and wisdom that they have to actually build something cohesive, because we can't do it without one of them. We need both of them collectively to be able to sustain this. And the last thing that I want to lift up is more just kind of a thought that I've been having over the past few months while I was on the streets during the uprisings in May and June. What I saw was that organizers were using violence as a tactic and as a strategy. Unlike what some of our media is telling us, it's not just this outburst of energy or emotion. It's like actually really thought through. That I watched organizers walk through the streets and say like, hey, we're going to start a blockade now, or hey, we're deciding to light a fire now. But it wasn't random. It was actually really thought through. And I think to sustain this, what we know is that in history, people have used violence as a strategy and as a tactic. And for us, us being the movement, I would love for us to think about how to do that in our current political atmosphere, in which police violence is increasing, state violence is increasing, and I would love for us to figure out how to use that as a real strategy and as a tactic and as something that is thought through and not just random, as part of kind of our arsenal of tools that we have to organize for our communities. Yeah, so that's all I had.
Okay, so thank you, respect, a lot of interesting thoughts there. Hold those thoughts or throw them in the chat if you want. We're gonna move to Nani and let her go. And then, you know, we'll come back to discussion after we get the whole picture from everybody.
Hey everybody, can you all hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. So Lilah did a really good job in distinguishing between activism and organizing. And something about me is all my life I've been kind of an activist. You know, I've always spoken up when I saw things that were wrong. And my entire life I actually wanted to do something like organizing, but I just never knew how to do it. But that's always been something that was innate in me. Like when I saw somebody being bullied, I spoke up. When I saw something was wrong, I spoke up. But after seeing the murder of George Floyd on camera, I kind of knew that I had to do something. It wasn't necessarily optional anymore. And again, I didn't really know what to do. But after seeing the subsequent action in Minnesota and basically everywhere, I was really inspired, and I wanted to do something. And I live in the town between Norristown and King of Prussia, which is called Bridgeport. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to organize a protest in King of Prussia. And I decided to get a couple people together. It was really small. And we stood out on the busiest intersection in King of Prussia, right on 202. And we sat there. And that first day, there were about 8 of us. And then the next day, the crowd doubled. And then every day for the first week, the crowd doubled until we had about 200 people out there. And, you know, we went on a march and there was about 400 of us. But after the first 2 weeks, like a lot of places in the United States, the crowd started to dwindle, and there were just 8 of us again. And the news coverage slowed down, the social media posts slowed down, but the police killings had not slowed down, and racism hadn't slowed down, and oppression hadn't stopped. So it was kind of like, it was disillusioning in a sense, because it was almost like we almost had something, but then we didn't. But you can go to the next slide. So what keeps me going? A big part of my sustenance, especially as I just said, when it's really easy to become disillusioned, at least for me personally, I do look to my beautiful Black family a lot, because they're kind of the source of that, you know, even though it doesn't seem like we have this rally cry anymore, you know, you have to do this for your family. So that's definitely a big part of my sustenance and my drive. Because if I don't have anybody else to fight for, I definitely always have my dad, have my nephews, have my nieces. Another part of my sustenance comes from myself, my beautiful Black self. My whole family, they're Black, and I love it here. I love my culture, and I just love it. So it's definitely something that I'm always going to rally behind, just because it's a part of myself that I love. And it took me a long time to love as well. It wasn't something that just, oh, I came out the womb loving my skin. No, it definitely was a process. But I'm also sustained by a reminder of the people that struggled before me and my ancestors, and the millions of people, the millions of slaves at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. A reminder of all those people who struggled before me definitely reminds me that giving up isn't an option, especially considering how arguably much easier it is to work now than it was before. So it's kind of like, you know, if they can do it, if they did it, if they died for it, then I can definitely, at the very least, do the same. So a reminder of their struggle and their sacrifices definitely forces me to keep going. Another thing that keeps me going is learning, specifically learning about my culture. A big part of African American culture has been the struggle, but there's a lot of beauty in that struggle. And that's something that I've been discovering specifically this summer. I've been learning about a lot of the different radicals, and a lot of them have helped shape who I am becoming right now. And I've been asking a lot of my elders about their experiences and, you know, where they were, particularly in the 60s. Like I know on my dad's side and my mom's side, they're all from Harlem, New York, and Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance. That was a really big place for a lot of Black culture. So hearing their perspectives and hearing what they were doing during that time is definitely like, it's something that's inspiring. Also, reading has been a really large part of my life, always, but since the beginning of the summer, I've been really intentional about what I've been feeding my brain and what I've been reading. So particularly, I've been learning about a lot of movements and organizations of the past, and one of the most inspiring organizations to me is the Black Panther Party. They've been very influential on who I'm becoming. And I just believe that the world needs that organization today just as much as they needed in the 60s. Because, you know, there's still a lot of people on this earth fighting for freedom. And that was the number one point of the Black Panther Party program. Number one, we want freedom. And there are still so many people fighting for that. And the understanding that young people of the Black Panther Party, like Huey P. Newton and Fred Hampton, who was murdered when he was 21, how they were able to change so much and to radicalize so many people that our government felt the need to wipe out the entire organization. It inspires me a lot. It should be scary, but it's actually really inspiring for me. Also, I'm definitely sustained by collaboration with like-minded people. I try not to only get one side of the story, but definitely when you're collaborating with people who are like-minded, you come out of a lot of those conversations with something. Like when you bring in a radical idea like abolishing prisons to a table of people who haven't necessarily heard that idea before, their responses can be discouraging, like, oh, no, we can't do that. No, no, no. But when you bring that idea to a table of people who also have prison abolition in mind, the collaboration and conversation that comes from that idea and that table allows you to leave the table feeling inspired rather than discouraged. You can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, it's been kind of disheartening to see how people abandon the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's almost as if a Black unarmed man has to be killed on camera for us to be moved to action. And if that's going to be the case, then we're never going to get to that point of a movement. And as Lilah was saying earlier, we need to do more than be activists. We need to organize, and that's how real change is going to come about. But I do think that in order to sustain what we have, in order to turn the potential that are these protests and that are the things that are going on in the world right now, in order to turn that potential into an actual movement and what I want to see happen as a revolution, I think we definitely have to change our focus to the streets. And by the streets, I mean the community, because I think that's where a lot of potential lies. And that's how we're going to take it to the next level. So when I say that, you know, yes, there's a lot of potential when it comes to legislation, but in my opinion, a lot of our movements have failed or end up stalling because we rely too heavily on our government to do the work that only the masses can do, only the community can do. And I think we have to get to a point where we stop depending on the government to do things that they've never done before. You know, it's kind of like we have no reason to believe this is what they're going to give us. They're going to give us freedom. We have to take that for ourselves. And I think in order to sustain this movement for Black lives, we have to expand our focus and our fight from things like police violence and racism to a more general stance of freedom. As a Black Panther Party, you know, one of their main tenets. Because I have learned, and I'm still learning, how many people in America and generally in this world are not really free. And I also think it would be really important for us to establish a global movement in which people in Palestine can contribute to what's happening here, and people here can contribute to what's happening in Palestine, and we're not so disconnected, because our issues in reality are very much connected. So we should all be, you know, learning about the same things and fighting on the same fronts. So yeah, and I also don't see our government really wanting to educate people on their contribution to what is happening in Palestine. So if they're not going to do it, then that's our responsibility. And we have to fight for our communities and build our communities. And, you know, again, that's something that we really have to take into our own hands. So as Lilah was mentioning, I think part of that community groundwork needs to be focused on the youth, because with the understanding that an entire generation of leadership was wiped out in the 60s, we have to know that somewhere along the line, we're going to have to reinsert that leadership into the youth and into the minds and spirits of people. So we have to be really intentional about, you know, cultivating our leaders and inspiring youth and recognizing them as a sustenance of this movement. I think that's going to be really important. Also, I think we have to inspire people generally, not just young people, but especially young people, and make them see that the power belongs to them. Generally, power belongs to them, and they have the power to take that power back themselves. You know, we don't have to rely on anybody else to do that, because we can do that ourselves. And I think generally, we have to collectively recognize that reform is not going to cut it. I can't think of a system in the United States where everything doesn't have to be completely revolutionized. And I think we have to become comfortable and even welcoming of the word revolution, and understanding that reform is not the goal, real substantive change is the goal. So I think that that's how we're going to begin to sustain this movement and turn it into what it should be, which is a revolution. Thank you.
Fantastic. And with no further segue, as I think it's a good one, Mayana Ashley-Carner is next. Well, you're muted. You're muted.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Mayana. I was an organizer with the Sunrise Movement, which is a movement dedicated to pushing for Green New Deal legislation in federal and local governments. And that was about a year ago. One thing Sunrise taught me is that one of the primary causes of climate change is the fossil fuel companies that are run by billionaires, and that billionaires lobby so much in government that they basically have as much influence as if they were a political party in and of themselves. And learning that really showed me that capitalism has such a huge influence on our lives and the problems that we face, like climate change and a lot of the other problems we see today. And it's like a big root cause of a lot of those problems. And I began to realize that only the abolition of capitalism would really be able to end climate change. You can go to the next slide. What sustains me is one thing is reading socialist theory, because I'm a socialist, and reading theory that socialists have written helps me to establish a framework for my ideas and to really show me what's possible and what other people have thought of before me. Another thing is learning about successful socialist movements of the past, because it inspires me to finish what they started, and it shows me that successful organizing is possible. And another thing is connecting with socialists right now in socialist organizations, and going to their events and hearing them talk, and it shows me that we're all on the same page and we have the same ideas, and there's a whole coalition of people who want the same things that I do, and we can work together to make them happen. You can go to the next slide. I think in order to sustain the movement, a really important thing is having class solidarity. So we need to understand that our interests as the working class, as people who do wage labor and our surplus value is taken by our capitalist bosses, we have more in common than anyone in the capitalist class. Like, we have more in common with each other as wage laborers than we do with anyone in the capitalist class, despite the fact that they may use identity politics to try and convince us that they have our interests in mind. Capitalism is really what's oppressing us, and they're the ones upholding it. And I think we need class solidarity, not just in the US, but internationally. And we need to understand that as the working class, we have the same interests, and we need to do something to enact them. And what I think we need to do is to organize for a class struggle. And like Lilah was saying, and Nani was saying, violence can be used as a tactic, and it's not just this thing where people lash out of anger and emotion, but can be used as a tactic to overthrow the ruling class. And I think that needs to happen, and we need to be really organizing to be militant and be an internationalized working class that can overthrow the ruling class and enact a new system. And I think that while we're doing that, we also need to organize for alternative structures to capitalism, because if we stop doing wage labor, we stop getting paid, and then we can't have resources like food and shelter. So we need to be organizing to provide those things for each other in our communities and neighborhoods, and to make sure that we convince other people that when they turn away from doing wage labor and they stop working and go on strike, we'll provide food for them, and so that they're not scared to do that. And I think that if we can do all of those things, we can have a really successful movement and maybe begin to see a new system that we're envisioning right now.
Okay, thank you. So I put those questions up there just because I didn't know how things would go or whatever. But really what I think is more interesting is to start with responses. And I want to encourage to think about speaking order in a broad way, which is that if you are a young person or young adult, that if you're like under the age of 25, or let me put it a different way, if you're over the age of 25, step back for a minute and let the younger people speak and young adults speak. And if you're under the age of 25, step up and maybe like, you know, your voice matters, right? It's like thoughts, questions, responses, and you don't have to like raise a hand or anything, just jump in. I'm on purpose pausing so we can chill, actually give people a time to think, because there's a lot, right? There's some radical notions that I think, first of all, I just want to thank all of you. Can we give them a round of applause? Yay, that was amazing. It was amazing. And I think that it's useful to be pushed powerfully, right? It's useful to be pushed powerfully and to be asked to think, what would it really look like if we were going to sustain these movements and our world and each other? You know, everything from alternative structures to active violence on the streets. So what terrifies you about that? What excites you about that?
I mean, I can like try to get the conversation going. Because personally, I have spoken to Lilah earlier in the summer when I first began getting interested in organizing, what that actually meant. And the concept of us having to rely on the vision of the youth is something that really sits strongly with me, just because I know, like, I talked to Mayana earlier this week, and you know, the ideas that she has and the ideas that I have, a lot of times if I were to bring that to an older person, leaving that conversation with them telling me, oh, that's not possible, is kind of like it makes me feel a little bit discouraged. So I definitely appreciated both hearing Mayana and Lilah.
I can definitely agree, like kind of getting like a older person's perspective rather than like someone our age. Like it is nice to like kind of get like both, but like you said, like Anaya, is that how you say it?
Ananiya.
Oh, Ananya, I'm sorry. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like it is discouraging because it's kind of like, I feel like older people, like, not that they want to discourage us, but they kind of be like, be realistic, like let's really think, like is something really going to change, or are we capable of that change? So I definitely agree with like the discouraging part, because I know like there's been times where I felt like I've been like discouraged or like talked down from something that is like, well, dang, like people my age agree with me, but somebody older like wouldn't have like the same mindset or the same perspective as like you would.
Yeah, and I want to say, I mean, again, like I said, that intergenerational organizing is a non-negotiable. Like we need all people in this, but I really believe that if a movement is not relying on the expertise of young people, they're going to be on the wrong side of history. Like if we look at the last 150 years, every movement has been led by young people. The lunch counter sit-ins with college students. Children were in charge of disseminating information at school to their parents in the civil rights movement. The Vietnam War resistance was on college campuses. Queer liberation was young people. Black Lives Matter, the Sunrise Movement, all of these major movements have been led by young people. And if older people are telling young people that that's not possible, they're on the wrong side of history.
Preach. And okay, I'm going to say, like, open it up. Thank you, older people of my generation and younger and slightly older, for giving some space to that. But like, you know, go to it. Other thoughts, questions, ideas?
It's Kiana, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely, that's how I feel, because I feel like a lot of older people, they tell me you have to be realistic. And the whole concept of their concept of reality, it is based on the past. And my thing is, I don't want to do anything that's been done before. I want us to do something that's never been done before. So you can't realize it because it's never been done. But why are we only relying on the images and things that have been done in the past? Because we know that hasn't worked. So it's like, you know, we have to really get out of that. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yes.
One of my favorite things about my family is my grandma decided to completely be different and say, you know, like, what do you want your world to look like when you grow up? I went to a lot of protests, and I still try and organize as much as possible when I have my free time. And a lot of my family says the same thing, like, what change do you really think you're making by standing on the street and holding a sign? And my grandma sat down with me and said, well, what do you want? Like, what change do you want? Because frankly, I'm old, I'm outdated. It's not my world anymore. You still have your 50 years ahead of you, plus some, hopefully. She's like, I'm going to be realistic. I have less than 20. So it's not up to me anymore. It is up to you guys. So it was really nice hearing like her push to say, like, here's my advice, here's what I experienced. Here's my view on it, but take that with a grain of salt, take what you want from that and run for it. Like, go for what you want, because it's not the older generation's world anymore. But still listen to them and take their advice and hear what they're saying, because they have experienced more life than you, but a different life. And you should go for the life that you want instead.
Nice. Got lots of thumbs up. I'm seeing lots of like lights go on in people's eyes and like, yes. I feel the same way.
So to like kind of go off of like what they both said too, like it was like a different world back then. So I feel like obviously like the older generation is gonna be stuck in this like mindset, because like stuff was done a certain way, like they would think a certain way, or it was that no substance change was happening. So it was kind of like they got stuck in that mindset, like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter, like we're just whatever. So that's why when like the younger generation is like, oh well, I want to do it this way, or I'm thinking differently, like outside the box kind of, that's why we get discouraged and that's why we get talked down on. And it really is like nice when like someone kind of like pushes you to do something that you feel like is right for you and your community, and and it really explores like that difference and that change in the community.
I'm gonna throw in a little theory here, which is neoliberalism, right? So neoliberalism, really, like one of the main things about neoliberalism is telling us there is no other way. Like Margaret Thatcher literally said, there is no alternative to capitalism. That was like in like the late 80s or something, right? That's actually a lie. That's not true. Of course there are alternatives, but we are led to believe that there is no alternative, right? And that's why I guess I'm putting the theory spin on what you guys are talking about in practice about what happens, like be practical, this is how it is, or if this is how it's always been. Well, first of all, no, this isn't how it's always been, right? Capitalism actually was invented. So was racism to actually justify capitalism is just justify racism, racism is just justify capitalism. And that's true about the extraction economy as well, right? Like it hasn't always been this way, and it doesn't always have to be this way. Like an important colleague to me said, because these things have been invented, humans invented them, we can change them. We actually can change them because we invented them, right? And I guess I'll also throw in, I just have to say this, like whenever I get a group of people in front of me that I don't necessarily know all of them, the world as it is currently constructed right now is organized the way it is for the benefit of approximately 2,000 white men and their families. Okay, there's a few people of color, a few women, whatever, but there are about 2,000 plus billionaires in the whole world. The whole world. We can fit them on like 2 really big airplanes, right? So everything we do, every move we make, every food we eat, every move in education we make is organized for the purpose of supporting those 2,000 people and their families. So if you don't think we should change something radically at this point, now that we've been schooled by the younger generation, let's rethink. Let's rethink, because no way, man. No way. We have time maybe for like just a couple more thoughts, but this has been sort of an amazing talk. So any last thoughts for either from our speakers or from anyone, really?
I mean, yeah, I can make a thought. I just think it's incredibly interesting I think just generally we have all, and it's probably been purposeful and implanted in us that we don't think that we can do things. And I just think like, you know, what if Huey P. Newton said, I can't do this? Or what if Alexander Hamilton said, oh, I can't do this? But whenever, you know, I think back and I think like there was really a whole American Revolution, and there was a whole, they completely revolutionized the Articles of Confederation and made it into the Constitution. And it's like, I just don't see why we can't do that again. Like, I just don't see it. And I wish people would, you know, recognize that they can in their own agency, because I feel like, you know, that's not going to be this whole system. It works for those 2,000 people, and they're the ones deciding how we live. Of course, they're not going to want to change it. So it's kind of like, you know, I just don't see why we can't do it. And that's something that I always ask people, like, why not? Like, why not?
Mayana, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so.
Lilah, any closing thoughts?
Well, so I wanted to lift up, I think Kristen put in the chat box around speaking more to the racist funding of education. If I can say it as quickly as possible, we're working to try to pass a bill that would put all of the state money for public schools in Pennsylvania through a formula that would distribute it equitably. Right now, it's fully on racial lines that white school districts are getting significantly more money, Black school districts are getting significantly less money. We're trying to fix that. I'll put my email in the chat box. There are actually some college professors already that are teaching courses centered around this bill and this current issue, so I would love to talk to you more about what that could look like. But closing thoughts in general, yeah, similarly to what has been said, like, why not do this work? Ultimately, like, if you all are seeing an issue on your campus or in your community, there is nothing stopping you from gathering a group of people and saying, what do we actually want to do about this? And then putting pressure on legislators or elected officials or whatever target you have to do that thing. So I would just would encourage you all to get groups of people together that are like-minded and that have similar goals in mind and actually move on something, because if you lose, we're in the same place we're in now.
Yeah. And I guess my closing thought off of that is, sometimes it feels like there's so much to do that it's hard to do anything, but actually, if you choose one issue and move on it, you're actually doing something, and that is a thing inside you, which is reinforcing for you and the other people you're working with that you matter and that you can do something, and then that matters in the world. That matters. So I want to thank everybody for coming and for the speak. Again, I want to just, you guys were amazing. You were so much better than anything I would have said. So I'm so proud and pleased to know you all. Thank you for being colleagues to me.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Lilah. Thank you, Ananiya. Thank you, Mayana. We are grateful that you gave your time and told us about the work you're doing and challenged us to think differently about it. I know, Hannah, you've got to head off to another class already, and probably the rest of you have to too. So, but we can keep the Zoom room open if anyone wants to stay and continue talking. And until then, please join us next week for a presentation by Professor McMahon from the Economics and Finance Department. And we've got 9 more presentations the rest of the semester after that. We'd love to have you join us. Thank you.